Hey, what's going on, guys? It's your boy, NerdMode, and welcome to episode 5 of Battle Reports, a video series where I'll be going over weapons in Battlefield 4 and breaking down the statistics of the weapon to provide you guys with a better idea of how the weapon is going to perform. So without further ado, let's get started. So for today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the CZ805. Now, of course, this weapon does clock in at 700 rounds per minute, with a velocity also clocking in at 580 meters a second, which is not too bad. It's actually pretty sufficient when it comes down to the main gist of it. Now, of course, transitioning your guys' eyes over to the damage model, you'll notice that this weapon does 25 damage up until 8 meters. Now, of course, after 8 meters, you're going to see a gradual decline of the overall damage being outputted at range. However, at 55 meters, you are going to be doing a minimum damage of 18 damage, which is pretty consistent with most of the assault rifles, especially in this particular category. Now, with that said, taking a look at the magazine size as well as the reload speeds, this will give us a better idea of how this weapon is going to perform, especially when it comes down to engagements and having to constantly be on the move. So you guys will notice that this weapon does occupy a 30 round magazine plus one in the chamber. Of course, you add those both together and you get 31 rounds total. That is pretty consistent with most of the assault rifles in this particular category, considering that there usually isn't a whole lot of deviation, and when there is deviation, it's usually due to the fact that there's a higher damage model, or in some cases that the weapon does spew out a lot more ammunition at range. Now, with that said, let's take a look at the reload speeds to kind of give you guys an idea of how much time you're going to be sitting through the animation. So of course, this weapon does have a short reload clocking in at 2.35 seconds, which is actually pretty quick, as well as a long reload clocking in at 2.9 seconds, so not much longer when it comes down to it. This is actually pretty sufficient. It's not as fast as other weapons, but by and large, it allows you to hopefully get right back onto the field, and it's a lot better than a lot of the other weapons similar in its category. And finally, the last piece of information to kind of talk about is the overall recoil numbers, because these numbers are going to be affecting you guys every time you pull the trigger, as well as hopefully compensating for the overall recoil patterns that will be presented while shooting the weapon. So obviously, you guys will be able to see that there is a left pull of 0.5 as well as a right pull of 0.35. Now, with that said, when it comes down to the vertical side of things, you guys will notice that the vertical recoil is clocking in at 0.29, which is actually pretty sufficient when it comes down to it. It's actually not as bad as some of the other weapons that are pretty much similar to the overall performance of this particular weapon, so it's a lot easier to compensate for the overall recoil. However, there is a first shot recoil of 2.1 times, and that's going to be a lot more sufficient than some of the other weapons also similar to itself, but by and large, you guys will notice that this weapon is going to be a lot more of a laser when it comes down to it. As long as you're peppering the trigger and you're trying to compensate for the overall recoil, you should do very well when it comes down to it. Now, of course, we did talk a little bit about the recoil numbers, but I'd like to let you guys know the way to compensate for this particular weapon is going to be pulling down and to the left. It's going to allow you to keep your reticule hopefully in the middle of the screen, also not deviating too much, especially if you are peppering the trigger or clicking the mouse multiple times to try to increase your overall accuracy at medium and long range, considering that the assault rifles are designated for those medium and long range combat scenarios. But anyway, guys, this has been this episode of Battle Reports. Hopefully you guys found some of the information useful when it comes down to the statistics of these specific weapons. But anyway, guys, if you have any constructive feedback to improve the episodes, feel free to let me know in the comments below. But until the next episode, guys, this has been NMO, and I'm going to be signing out, guys. Peace.